I'll get to the know of some of the questions that you've been asking along the way. So thank you all so much for the survey feedback because it's been really, really good. It's great to have. So just as well as this is our last session, I just want to really pay tribute to everyone who's inputted into this. So all the programs have had an input into these sessions and the sessions in November. And it wouldn't be the same without everybody. So Life Start, Preparing for Life, Parent Child Plus, Let's Grow Together, Community Families, Community Mothers, and the Home Visiting, under the guise of the Home Visiting Alliance. So really big thanks. And we've got contributions today from Life Start and Preparing for Life and Community Families as well. So great stuff. So thank you all so much. And I just want to also just say it's not just today that if people have shown up on your screen, they've been harassed during the weeks and they've been on other video calls and they've been responding to emails. So it's not just their time today that they're giving, it's been time in the background as well. So big thanks. So today we're going to look a little bit more about data collection at session 3, those measures that we mentioned before, and how we actually gather the data. And you're going to get a chance as well to chat to each other again. And as I said before, I've copious amounts of notes here as well as the video recording. So we're sending all that feedback back up. So today we're talking about data, and it's not, it can be sound a bit technical and mind-blowing. So hopefully we can demystify some of that and make it a little bit more simple. And I suppose what I want to do is maybe give you an insight into the people who are gathering all this information and the job they have to do with what we're gathering, and why we're using different tools or different measures as well. So in terms of data collection, we're collecting so much data. And when you guys filled out the survey, the Mentimeter, there was lots of different reasons why we're collecting data. Sometimes it's for just pure practical reasons in our practice, like we need to know people's names, addresses, dates of birth, and so on. But that's not information that's ever going to go anywhere. That's really in our notes, if we're using CRMs, in our CRMs, that stays in our organization or even in your file. So not even other people in your organization can see that data. And that's like family updates, observations, your notes. And so observations are some of those things you might be noting down. And then there's that other data that we need to learn about the program. So for learning or research, and that's obviously harder. There's much more to think about when we're collecting that, because you can imagine at the moment we've got 3,000, 4,000 families receiving home visiting in Ireland, and that's going to grow. So you can imagine, if you're in the National Programme Office, we had Caroline at the last session, Caroline and Thomas have to analyze all that information and make sense of it. And when you've got lots of it coming in, and we have to make sure that we're collecting the data in a certain way. So I want to give you some insights into that. So we're going to focus a lot about the learning and the research, whatever the other information you gather within your organization. And that will all be slightly different because you might be delivering Parent Child Plus in a family resource centre. So the family resource centre might want information that's separate than what Parent Child Plus might want, or whatever the programme is that you're delivering. And just as well, before I go any further, just to flag all the stuff we're talking about today, it's really good to go back to your teams, back to your coordinator, your manager and your leaders, because everyone does things slightly different. What we're presenting today is quite a generic way of doing things, their ideas and thoughts about improving practice and so on. So bring it back to your team and see how it fits with what's already planned and organised within your programme. So data is it's not all created equally. So some data can be more valuable, if you want to put it like that, than others. So there's information, what we call categorical data. So that's really yes or no. Are you currently breastfeeding? Yes or no. It's very clear cut. And that's what I mean by kind of categorical. There's other data then we gather from the standardized measures, and we're going to take a deep dive into those today. And there's different types of measures, and we use the term psychometric properties, and I'll say that I use that, as I said the last time, just to separate that out from your kind of your standardized checklists that you might use in your intake form or whatever. These are separate tools that have certain properties that we'll talk about briefly. But some of them are just forms you fill in, like our parents fill in, like the TOPSY, the SDQ, the child-parent relationship scales. But the others are more complex observation measures. And they involve a lot more. So they're different to maybe the observations you're doing in your day-to-day work, which stay in your notes and are really important because you might want to share them with your team or your colleague or use in supervision, but they're not necessarily there. That's harder to quantify and to know what information you're gathering. So there's some observation measures. One is the home observation measurement of the environment. So that's assessing the home environment. The other is around parent-child interactions. Some of those observation measures are video-based, so you might even video of child and family working together. So they're scored in a certain way. They require a certain amount of training. So we're not going to really touch on those today because at the moment nobody's they're not used, across the programs. That might be a direction we go in the future. But just to let you know, they're out there. And as I say, they require really quite training because you can imagine your observation as one home visitor might be very different than another home visitor. And it all depends on what knowledge, expertise, experience you've had. So they're a different breed. So we're going to park those, but I just wanted to flag that they do exist. Then there's those standardized checklists that you will have in your program, and they might be things that come down from the head office that are standard to, say, Life Start or Preparing for Life or Community Families, but they're not actually international tools. They're in-house tools that you've developed yourselves. And then there's always the qualitative data. And that's the data that we all love. And you get the real rich feedback from parents, but it's a real nightmare to analyze and to bring together and collate because you have to read you have to read through so much. So it's much harder to gather that information. And so that might be why in some ways that rich storytelling and that rich information is there, but it's really hard to pull out. And that's, I suppose, one of the reasons why we tend to move towards those measures that are yes, no, 1 to 5, because they're much easier to analyze and to pull together. So it's just also there's costs. Sorry, I'll just go back there. There's costs involved in some of the tools. The tools we're presenting today are free, but there are other ones like the Ages and Stages, which is a tool that the Public Health Nurse System are going to be rolling out. That's a paid for tool. It costs for that. So, there are other measures out there and tools out there. Some of them cost, some of them don't. So the other thing we think about when we're choosing some of these is whether we actually have data, Irish data for it. So that's another reason why we might say, for example, use questions that are on the census form so that we can align to that, or we might use data. So the TOPSY has been used a lot, and Helga's going to do a deep dive into the TOPSY first, but that's been used in Life Start studies, randomized controlled trials, as well as ABC evaluation. So, there's a reason we've got data from Ireland on some of these measures. That's a reason why we might use them. And so a lot of thought goes into all this. So this is what you all shared with us in the Mentimeter from way back when you first started. We asked you what data you collect, and you can see everyone's collecting a whole load of rich data. And most people collect data on kind of what you do each day. So the day-to-day working, the sort of family demographics, parent satisfaction data, and that's something, I know I'm just going to use an example in Community Families. We spend so much time gathering other information. We have a parent satisfaction, the Community Families have a feedback form, but we didn't embed it into our CRM yet. So that, everyone's at different stages as well. The other thing we don't, and if you remember last session, we talked about inputs and outputs. And one of the inputs is obviously the amount of time we spend on training and your own professional development. So that information is also really important to have. So, and that's also, again, something that all of us across the programs are slower at keeping a record of so that we can show how much training we all do. So, and you can see that's there. 16 is a little bit lower. The highest is obviously 29 attendance. And that's, if you remember the last session, we talked about outputs. Another word for outputs are kind of bums on seats. They are kind of like how many people turned up, how many, what did we do, how many we did. So that's obviously the biggest thing that everybody's gathering. So it gives us an insight into the data we're collecting every day. And again, at the end of towards the end of today's session, we're going to touch on what a CRM is, but you're all collecting this in very different ways on paper forms, adding it up, CRMs, Excel spreadsheets. So it's not an easy task, Okay, so next one is, so yeah, one of the other things I just wanted to talk about is that, a lot of us and across all the programs have spent time looking at the questions that are being asked as well when we're choosing what forms to use and so on. And it's really important that the questions, and I know again, Helga and Jane will touch on this around the kind of, we don't want forms that in any way create a judgment. And we want to make sure they're kind of really positive and strengths-based. So that's in line with our ethos. And so a lot of us have spent a lot of time on that. And I think I've covered everything else there. And I'm going to touch on validity and reliability in a minute, but how easy it is to quantify it and analyze it. So there's lots of thought that goes in to what we're gathering. So I just want to give you an example of some of the questions that we're having to think about when we're collecting data for a program learning. So I could ask a question, did you breastfeed? And then we might get an answer, yes. But what does that actually mean? Did you just breastfeed once in hospital? Did you breastfeed when you came home? Did you breastfeed for 3 months? Did you do half bottle, half breast? So that question isn't really a great question to ask. We have to think about what way the answer is we want, what's the information we want, is it at a particular time, So these are all the sort of things we need to think about. And again, we might ask a question like, do you have any health concerns? And people might say, give us loads of information and list all their health concerns. Somebody might say a few. Somebody might say yes. What does that mean? So we really have to spend time thinking about the questions we're asking and anticipating what the answers might be. So it's really good to kind of think through that. So, we need to think about how the questions we ask, and that's on our referral form, our information, or some people call it an intake form and so on. And there's different ways we can do that. We can restrict the answers, drop down choices, yes, no, have them 1 to 5. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time about this accurate data. And sometimes you might hear as well the concept of data cleaning. So we're going to, and it sounds like, oh my God, what's that mysterious thing people do? Data cleaning, some sort of scientific process. It's not. It's a boring and tedious job of making sure that the data is all easy to quantify and it makes sense. So this is not what I meant when I said we need better data cleansing. And you might hear this as we move, especially when we move closer to kind of sending information up to a national program office. So you can see here, obviously, we're not asking you to put computers into a sink. But just as an example, we had asked you guys at the start, and the reason this all data cleaning hinges on as well how easy it is, the question you've asked, but also the answers options you've given people. So you can see here, we asked the question, what county are you zooming in from? And when we looked at the answers here in the word cloud, because I wanted a word cloud because it's nice and looks pretty, you can see people answered loads of different things, but we had some towns listed, we had some countries listed, and at a quick glance, county and country can be really quickly, if you're in a rush, easy to. So you have to think about this from the person who's gathering this information. And as you say, if we're looking at a national point of view, we could have over 4,000 records. So someone has to go through all that and align it and say, well, what does all this mean? So I went through, we had about 45 or 47 people, I think, filled it in. So I went through, categorized those that were it was quite quick to do. That would be kind of in the other category. And then we just have counties listed then, you can see. But it didn't take too much time, but it does take time, especially if you have more than 50 to do. So I could lay it out in this sort of graph here, or I could lay it out like this, and you can see that Dublin is the darkest, was the most, as you can see in the word cloud, and so on. But if you think about it, this introduces us to another concept, which is called validity. And I suppose did the question ask what it was supposed to ask? You know, and when we're thinking about that, was the question really good enough? And another way I could have worded it was, what county in Ireland or Northern Ireland are you zooming in from? And then we would have gotten clearer answers. So again, it's trying to think through maybe why questions are the way they are. And, you know, you might be receiving it from down the line from head office, but a lot of thought has gone into some of these questions to make sure the answers we get are easy to make sense at the end. And I just give you another example. We'd asked you guys what programs you all provide. And again, imagine what it would be like if we had this for 4,000 families. And, you know, so I'm familiar with the program, so I'm able to kind of anticipate, well, that must mean this and this must mean that, and cluster them together. So I was able to produce the numbers for each program and have a category as other. As you can see, we've got Parent Child Plus, we've got PC, we've got Parent Child, we've got, you know, Life Start Growing Child, we've got Life Start, you know, we've got all sorts of different ones. And again, this introduces another kind of concept you might hear called reliability. And that just means different answers, different people, different days. You know, I might have been talking about, I don't know, say the infant mental health home visiting, and I might one day say let's grow together because we're talking about something else, or another day I might say something else. So we need to make sure how we get the right information back. So how reliable is the tool, that if I ask the same person on different days, will I get, you know, the same, will they understand and it mean the same on different days? And so instead of question, what I could have done is just given everybody a multiple choice, and everyone would have had to fit their answer into my choices. So that would have made much better sense. So it's really important to think about, when you are filling in forms, have a consistency amongst your team, understand what is the answer that we're really looking for, why are we asking parents this question, and what is the meaning behind the answer they're giving us. So that's just a little example of the data cleaning, but it also explains why we do use some of these measures like the TOPSI and the Warwick, Edinburgh, and so of those. And that's because they've already been through robust testing. They have an evidence base behind them. And we know they have that concept of validity and reliability, that we know that no matter when you use them with different families are going to generally understand that question in the same way. And it will measure what it says it does on the tin. It will measure the county, it will measure the concept like mental well-being or social support or whatever it is. They're also have a lot of guidance on how to administer them. They've got scoring, so you'll generally have an average score and high and low scores. They've generally been translated into, some of them have been translated into different languages. They're always adapting them and changing them, and I know Helga will touch on that with the TOPSI. And so that's one of the reasons why we opt for these measures, and it makes sense to us then, and we can use them. And so if you're using them in Life Start, and we use them in Preparing for Life or Community Families, we're all using the same tool and they're generating the same type of information. So that's really the background behind why we use these measures. So are we moving on? Yeah, just to let you know, they're used across Ireland, and there's been a real, especially with the area-based childhood programme and Atlantic Philanthropies, they're used quite a lot. So there's lots of information out there and lots of detail. And we won't be going into as much detail as exists in the guidebooks of each of these, or the guidance on how to use them, because that's something you can read yourselves, you can read with your team, and it's important to read that information so that you understand the background behind it. We are touching on some of that today, but we also want to touch on the more pragmatic ways of introducing them to families as well. So check out some of the resources, spend time having a look with your team around some of these. And the other thing about this is, at the start we had the slide about practice and learning. And I guess what I wanted to say is, it's not such a clear delineation. These tools really can impact your practice. And I know that's, again, what Helge and Jane will touch on today. So I better move along, because I said I'd be finished. Just to let you know, there is another website out there. If you want to look at, there's so many different measures out there. You can Google and explore if you want to measure health, if you want to measure well-being, and so on. Okay, so, and again, before using any of these measures, again, back to your team, have practice, do role play, fill them out yourselves as an individual, be really comfortable about how to use them. And what I would say is that sometimes we, in different times, you might not always be giving a score back to families or formally, but you should really make sure you understand them, because parents are entitled to that information should they ask for it. And that, if they understand it. So really familiarize yourself, but do buy yourself time to score some of these. Some organizations don't score them home visitors, while some of them, the coordinators score them, or they're scored at head office, or whatever it may be. But as a home visitor, just be familiar and comfortable with it so you can confidently address any questions parents may have. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Helge. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, Helge. So I'm delighted to introduce you to Helge Tinney from, have I said your surname correct, Helge?
Tinney.
Tinney from LifeStart, all the way up from Donegal. So I'll hand over to Helge, who's going to talk us through the LifeStart's experience of using the Topsy.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everybody. So the tool of evaluation that we use within the LifeStart service is, as Susan has mentioned, is the Topsy. And Topsy is just simply measuring parent self-efficacy and why it is important. So you can go ahead, Susan, thank you. So just before we get into Topsy itself, just to be clear as to what parent self-efficacy actually is. So parenting efficacy is the extent to which parents feel capable of managing the challenges of parenting, which, evolve over time and change so much. So measuring parenting self-efficacy is really important. It's their belief in their ability to perform successfully in their parenting role. Efficacy is a critical factor in the quality of parenting. So research has suggested that high levels of parental self-efficacy is associated with increased quality of parent-child interactions, increased parental warmth and responsiveness. So a parent's ability to grow and develop in their role is also affected as their children enter into adolescence and beyond. So, when we look at that as a whole, that is, so vitally important. So research has shown that parent self-efficacy can be positively impacted through parenting intervention programs, luckily enough for us. There are various tools to measure parenting self-efficacy, of which Susan has touched upon, but I'm just going to focus on the Topsy as it's the one that we use within the LifeStart service. Okay, go ahead, Susan, you can go ahead. So what is Topsy itself? So firstly and foremost, Topsy is a tool to measure change in parenting self-efficacy and the tool used within LifeStart to measure outcomes. Secondly, Topsy is used to evaluate the effectiveness of the LifeStart program. Topsy then is useful for identifying specific strengths and challenging areas for parents, but it also identifies those challenging areas and those strengths for us as practitioners as well, which enables us to do our job better. So Topsy is also a really extremely useful tool for funders, which we can understand, but really that is down the line. Measuring parenting self-efficacy is what we aim to do with Topsy initially. So parents complete the first Topsy booklet at the start of their program intervention. in and around the first couple of visits, if at all possible. The second TOPSI booklet is due to be completed at the end of the program intervention. So whether the intervention is a year long, 2 year long, or 5 year long, it will be completed at the end of their intervention. It's also possible to provide a third TOPSI booklet many months after intervention, because that provides LifeStart with, being able to measure, has this change been maintained? Can parents maintain positive self-efficacy in their parenting once the LifeStart intervention has, I suppose, been removed? So LifeStart, I suppose once we were using TOPSI for a while, a few years ago, we realized that we needed to maybe make some changes to our TOPSI delivery to suit the wide ranges of ages that we support and to capture the impact of our intervention, which may start actually pre-birth. But in Ireland, I think it's predominantly used from 6 months onwards. Okay, next slide, Susan. So why we use TOPSI in the first place is very similar to what Susan has been saying. Researchers originally developed the tool just to determine if attending a parenting support service had an impact on their parenting or their views of parenting. So in home visiting then, in turn, we're going to use it for 2 reasons. It presents the opportunity to discuss and explore your thoughts on the individual as a parent and their parenting, and it helps us as a service evaluate how we do our work and how and if it makes a difference to parents, which is hugely important. So the information regarding TOPSI for parents, when we introduce it, it's quite broad and it's designed to be less daunting for parents. Evaluation tools and any types of form filling can be very daunting. So parents are very simply advised that completing the booklet, they'll be helping us evaluate our program, and they'll be enabling us to make improvements. There's no right or wrong answers, and their booklet won't be compared with other parents, and it will remain confidential. Go ahead, Susan. So the TOPSI topics and scalings, they're very broad, but the questions in which are asked, they're quite tight, and you can see clearly the information that they're trying to gain. So it's important that parents understand that TOPSI is not a test. It's not a comparison to other parents or a tool of judgment in any way. And I think when it is introduced and delivered initially, if we, try to remove as much judgment as possible, we will have more success with the TOPSI output. So it is simply a tool to measure parent efficacy and program effectiveness. So there's 8 TOPSI topics. So we have emotion and affection, play and enjoyment, empathy and understanding, parental control, discipline and setting boundaries. We have the pressures of parenting, which we all know are huge, self-acceptance in parenting, and learning and knowledge. So those are the 8 topics, and the scaling goes from 0 to 10, with 0 being completely disagreeing and 10 being completely agree, and obviously 5 being a moderate agree in the middle. So within the questions, there are also some negatively phrased statements which are designed to avoid response set with parents and offer parents opportunities to really think about their answers. So we're not always going to choose number 10 or number 8 or number 7, that they really have to decide what it is they want to, how they want to answer each question. Go ahead, Susan. So the TOPSI scoring, it has its own scoring system designed to provide many insights into parenting self-efficacy and in turn program effectiveness. So home visitors and support workers, we do not score in LifeStart. We don't score our individual clients. Unlike other tools of measurement, TOPSI is not measuring a parent's immediate well-being. So therefore, there's no urgency in obtaining the scores within TOPSI. The Growing Child program itself, which we deliver, will offer lots of opportunities to be able to approach any mental health or parenting challenges on an ongoing basis. So we're not in any immediate hurry to score the TOPSI. So this allows TOPSI to be solely used for the intended measurement of parent self-efficacy and program effectiveness. So I have some examples to follow. Go ahead, Susan. So this is the emotion and affection, and I'm not going to go into them all. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. These are the questions. Why, when my child is sad, I understand why. Go ahead, Susan. Play and enjoyment. Am I able to have fun with my child? Playing with my child comes easily to me. Go ahead, Susan. Empathy and understanding, I am able to explain things patiently to my child. Go ahead. Control. As a parent, I feel I am in control. Go ahead. Discipline and setting boundaries. Setting limits and boundaries are easy for me. I am able to discipline my child without feeling guilty. Go ahead. Pressures. Is it difficult to cope with other people's expectations of me as a parent, which is a huge one? Go ahead, Susan. And self-acceptance. I know I am a good enough parent, which can be difficult for parents to applaud themselves or to sometimes really explore that and be honest with themselves. Go ahead. Learning and knowledge. I'm able to recognize developmental changes in my child. And, for us, the Growing Child is a child development and parent support program. So it's really important that we can see that parents are growing in this area, and that will show the effectiveness of our program. Okay, Susan. So just a quick overview now before I finish. There is currently a Topsy pilot version, which is specifically for 0 to 6 months. There's a tool for mothers to be, and fantastically, there's an accessible tool for mothers to be who have learning challenges. So many programs have used Topsy with successful outcomes and yielding really valuable data. So introducing Topsy to parents will not always go according to plan and will rely on a connected strengths-based relationship between practitioner and parent. So when we use reflective practice within our delivery and encourage parents to be reflective in their parenting journey, it makes it so much easier to introduce tools such as Topsy, as parents are already invested in their own growth and development as parents. When there is significant pushback or reluctance to engage regarding Topsy engagement by parents, it's always due to other unmet needs. It's not usually the problem with Topsy, it's an unmet need. So exploring this in greater depth and at a pace suitable for the individual parent will often offer valuable information that will strengthen the relationship with the parent and then will more often than not result in full Topsy engagement by the parent once their unmet needs are either explored or validated or met. So pushback, always remember, pushback and difficulty with these types of questions are usually down to other unmet needs. Okay, Susan. So finally, Topsy is designed to easily demonstrate whether progress or improvement has been made in which areas exactly and how well the program is working. Topsy has a specific and vigorous scoring method to reach the necessary conclusions. Parent efficacy and child self-efficacy support each other. If we have good parent self-efficacy, we will have good child self-efficacy. So believing in your ability to parent well is an important belief to establish the necessary skills to parent well. As Henry Ford said years and years ago, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So it's a huge, it really has such an impact on thinking and believing in yourself. So self-efficacy, it's not a fixed trait. We can improve and support self-efficacy with the right intervention, the right knowledge, and the right encouragement and support. It's a very important tool. It has to be seen as a valuable tool and not just another form filling exercise, as it has the potential to provide really valuable information for parents themselves, for children, indeed, particularly first parents and children, and then us as practitioners, and of course then the knock-on effect for evaluating the effectiveness of our program and to keep, of course, funders happy. So that is Topsy in a nutshell.
That's excellent, Helga. And we will take some questions and answers, but I might wait until Jane and everyone. But that is just
absolutely.
excellent. And I just, you described it so well there, and your guidance on what to do when you get an unanticipated response. At the same time, when we were preparing for this, I think if I'm right, your experience to date has been that parents enjoy it?
Yeah, I think we are a strengths-based program, you know, and I suppose many years ago, we had a longitudinal evaluation. So a lot of our staff are used to the evaluation process. You know, I think if you don't fear it as a practitioner, you won't pass on that fear to your client or to your parent. So
Yeah,
we have had, luckily for us, a lot of experience introducing evaluation tools. So, you know, it's really down to don't fear it. It's not something to be feared. It's something that's going to be really valuable. And to always remember that if there's pushback, it's often another unmet need, and it's not down to you as a practitioner. And it's just not the right time right now for that parent, and that has to be taken into consideration. And if we can look below the surface and find out what's really going on for that parent, usually
yeah.
once we can meet those needs, then tops there'll be full engagement with Topsy.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great guidance, and from years of expertise as well in using it. And I think what's great about this is, one of the titles of our whole training session is outcomes focused uh, training. And you can see having a tool like the Topsy then actually goes back and helps you shape your curriculum as well, because you're flagging ideas and things that are happening for parents. You're saying, well, actually, maybe we need to build this more into our supports for parents so that they can grow in that particular area, and so on. So that's great. Thank you so much, Helga.
No
And
problem.
hold on now, because you're not getting away with it that easily. There'll be questions, I'm sure. So let's go on to Jane, if that's okay, in from Preparing for Life. And Jane is going now. If I can move it along. Oops, what am I doing? There we are. So Jane's going to talk us through the Preparing for Life experience of using the Warwick Edinburgh. And I think if I'm right, both Preparing for Life, Life Start, and now Community Families use both the Topsy. Jane, you might double check that. But Community Families and Preparing for Life use the Warwick Edinburgh. So I'll hand over to Jane there.
Hi, how are you? Thank you, Susan. Yeah, so we use the Warwick Edinburgh, and we've been using it for as long as we've been doing the research questionnaire, so about 5 years now. And it's woven into our wider questionnaire that we do pregnancy, 6 months of age, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years. So we do it at numerous time points throughout the family's time with us. So right there on the first slide, you can see that it's quite a short measure in comparison to the Topsy, but it can take 2 minutes or it can take a lot longer. It will completely and utterly depend on the family. So you can see there that there's numerous statements, and the family or the parent that you're doing the research questionnaire with is going to hear those statements and then reflect on whether over the previous 2 weeks, just the previous 2 weeks, whether they've been feeling that statement. None of the time, rarely, some of the time, often, or all of the time. And as you can imagine, quite often a family hasn't actually stopped to think about these things. So it can take quite a long time to do it, because it's that slowing down and reflecting on things that maybe the family didn't even consider at all. So as you can see, we've got optimistic about the future, feeling useful, been feeling relaxed, interested in other people, energy to spare, which always gets a laugh when you ask someone who's about 8 months pregnant or who has a 2-year-old. Been feeling good about my self-confidence. So you can see from that it's strengths-based. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why we chose it. If you want to go to the next slide, Susan, please. So it is strengths based. So I suppose there was, when we were looking at what we would use to measure kind of maternal well-being from pregnancy and at all the different time points throughout the program, that was one of the things that made it attractive to us. So it gives the family a chance to reflect on what's actually going well, what's working for them, what's feeling good for them right now, as well as any challenges that might come up as well. So it's not just focusing in on what's going wrong or what's difficult mentally. It's got that balance as well, which I think makes it a little bit easier and a bit more attractive, and families a little bit more open to taking part in it as well. So as you can see there, it's developed to measure population level mental well-being. So as Susan was saying, like, it's used across the board, it's used widely, we can compare it to other things. However, it's not a diagnostic tool. So we're just looking at well-being. It's not a mental health tool. And again, to be very clear with a family at the start, that we're not like doing a mental health diagnosis on them. We're just checking in to get a snapshot, and we'll talk about that a bit more. And as you can see there, as we said, it's strengths based, and there is the guidebook which gives guidance on the administration and giving feedback to people who've used it. And of course, as I said, it's been used widely. So as you can see, the HSE are using it as well across social prescribing. If you want to go to the next one, please. So experience from the ground. So I'm going to talk about how we introduce the measure and what it's like after we use the measure, and following up with parents and when things don't go according to plan. And I'll just briefly talk about when the measure was introduced to us as something to use as well. So quite mirroring what we talked about in other weeks. At first there was a little bit of trepidation. We're not mental health professionals. What do we do if something major comes up? You know, what's this got to do with our program? But I suppose with lots and lots of practice and lots of use, we've all come full circle to seeing the massive value that it has for the program. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. If you want to go ahead, Susan. Okay, so introducing it to parents. So as Helga was saying, and as we said with all the measures, how we introduce this to parents is obviously crucial as to how it goes. And I'd really back up what Helga said around, if you're comfortable with it and familiar with it and well versed in it and practice with it, you will not transmit the fear to parents. I don't know if I've ever had a parent refuse to take part. Obviously, we have parents who refuse just to take part in questionnaires in general, but I've never been in the middle of a research questionnaire, gotten to the Work Edinburgh, and had a parent say they weren't interested. So again, once we're very clear on what it is and what it isn't, and we're very open about how it's used, parents are generally quite receptive to it. And it can also be nice as well, because it helps us focus in on the parent in front of us as opposed to the child and the parent. And it's to give that attention to that parent as an individual, and on how the program is impacting them, and on how we can support them to change something that needs to be changed. So at home visiting, obviously, we use it for two reasons. So again, opening up those opportunities to chat and explore what you think about your mental well-being. And I'm sure you'd all agree, it's frightening how often someone hasn't had the time to sit down and even reflect for a short amount of time on how they are and how parenting has been impacting them or any other life circumstances. And then of course it helps the program check in on how we're doing. So obviously, as I said, we do it at those different time points, so we can easily compare one that was done at 6 months postnatal to 2 years and see, is there a difference for the mom? And again, at 3, 4, and 5 years. And again, obviously being open and being optional, it being optional to the parents is crucial. If you want to go ahead, Susan. Okay, so there's lots of things to consider when it's been introduced. Just as much as it's important for a parent to know what it is, it's really important to know what it isn't. We'll always have a percentage of families who may have had a lot of interaction with mental health services or mental health difficulties in the past. And it's very important to be clear that we're not assessing their mental health or diagnosing any mental health difficulty. So what we have found really helpful is going back to what we spoke about other weeks, is literally doing this with each other, getting into character. I know everybody hates the word role play. I hate the word role play, but it really helps to have said your prepared phrases out loud over and over again. I mean, you might not want to do it on each other as your real selves, but if you can get into character and answer the question and put yourself in the shoes of a mother who might be taking part, and as the home visitor, rehearsing those phrases over and over again out loud. So when you say them out loud in a home, it really feels like you know your stuff, to you that you know your stuff, and you'll exude that confidence as well. So some of the phrases that I've probably used in the past will be, this is about your emotional well-being over the past 2 weeks, and it just gives us a snapshot of how you have been. So it's not too heavy, it's just a snapshot of how you've been over the last couple of weeks. It helps you reflect on your mood recently and what might be impacting it, because again, you might have a mom who's really struggling, but she hasn't had time to sit down and think about what it is actually that's impacting her mental health. It helps us to check in and reflect on what is challenging and what's going well for you. And it helps us think about any support you might need, if any. We'll explain about the scoring. There is an entire scoring that we haven't got on the presentation today that is in the guidebook, and there's a cut-off point. So for us, our procedure is, if it's below a certain number, we will address that with the parent. And when I say address it, usually quite informally around, you know, if it's below a certain point, that usually indicates that someone might need a little bit of emotional support. I'd say 9 times out of 10, I've had this conversation. The family had already identified that themselves and maybe were already linked with mental health services, but it can be a fabulous opportunity to get in there and bring up that conversation where they haven't accessed mental health services or haven't actually named that they need it and you've been worried about them. Having that score there to say, oh, it looks like, you know, things are quite tough for you right now. I wonder, could we look at any services that might help or any supports that might help as well? And again, that'll be different depending on your own agreed procedure with your service. Usually we would say something like, and again, depending on your own policy and your own service, I'll score this when I get back to the office. There's a cut-off, and if it's below that, I'll check back in with you the next time, or I'll give you a phone call about any support you might like to access, or I can signpost you to appropriate services. And I suppose the beauty of doing this at multiple time points when you know the family really as well is you're going to edit these and edit your language in terms of what family you're talking to and what you feel they might respond best to. At this point, for most of us, I think we've been doing it so long in PFL that I can kind of tell by looking at it that it's going to be below the cutoff point. So again, depending on how it's feeling in the moment, I might say to a mother, I can see from the answers here that your score is going to be quite low. It might indicate, you know, that usually indicates you might benefit from a bit of support. And is this something you'd like to explore? And again, being really confident about that and reminding yourself that that might not be something a parent responds to in the moment, but they might come back to you another week. And it might also have been something that they wanted to talk to you about, but didn't actually have the words or the courage to name. So instead of it being a stigma that you're offering this support, it might actually be opening a door for them to ask for something that they need. Next slide, please, Susan. So yeah, things just to consider that I think are important when it's something that you're using regularly with families. Agreed procedure in place with your team, with your manager, in the event of a low score, so that you are prepared for that. So again, agreed phrases to use, agreed ways of offering external support, ensuring that you and your team have up-to-date information on what support is actually available, because I know for us, and we're in an urban area and there's still very little available. So I can imagine sometimes there's very little that is available. So just knowing what there actually is there so you can actually offer something can be really important. An agreed procedure in terms of and again, this links into the next point, reflective supervision and support available to the home visitor. So quite often it will just be a conversation about low mood, feeling burnt out, maybe anxiety, but often what can come up is some kind of very complex issue or disclosure of an issue or an event that maybe you didn't know about before. So it's very important that you know what to do with that afterwards in terms of who to kind of have ad hoc supervision with, so that you are able to deal with that in the moment or after the issue as well. Being prepared to go at the parent's pace, which, as I said, I have done these where we have flown through it in a few minutes and the parent had no interest in going into any more detail. Or I have done many where we've had to pause at a certain point and slow it right down. So it could have taken up a large amount of time, or it could have ended up pausing and having to wait till the next session, which is frustrating when you want to get your questionnaire done and back in on time. But I suppose, as we've said with everything, during this process, the relationship has to come first. And when that comes first, then you are going to get those more honest answers over time from the family. And I suppose trust in yourself that you know your families and that you've got an instinct for your families, slowing it down where it feels like you need to and pausing where needed, and always reminding the parent that they can stop or we can come back to it. It can be really frustrating because it can go off on absolute tangents. But 9 times out of 10, when it's gone off on absolute tangents, I suppose for us, it has led to us having that deeper relationship with the family and finding out things around the mother's experience that we may not have known before. Next slide, please, Susan. And then again, as always, when things don't go according to plan, I'd echo most of what Helga said as well. When you start out, it can be like, oh, I just wanted to just do it and have it according to plan and tick it off the list and have it done. But again, not to be all, you know, spinning the positive and everything, but usually when it doesn't go to plan, you learn something about the family, or you learn something for the next time. quite often the unexpected reactions that we fear are the negative ones, and of course we get them. But sometimes we get unexpected reactions with the Warwick Edinburgh that might be positive as well. Um, so for both, I suppose being prepared and familiar with the measure, so going back to that role play and reading it over and over again, and ensuring that you understand the purpose of the measure, reading the guidelines, can really help you kind of slow down and just cope with those moments, whether they be positive or negative. And again, if they are difficult, if a parent is getting upset, if something is coming up, just can't reiterate enough the value of slowing down, pausing, and always putting the parents' feelings first. I suppose a couple of examples of it not going to according to plan would be I would have a family who would on the outside have it all together, two professional parents, very competent, the usual stresses and strains of raising a child, but I would have done a Warwick Edinburgh at 2 years of age, with mum, and the score was absolutely on the floor. Um, and it came out about severe parental burnout, full-time working parent, issues in the marriage around workload as well. And I suppose I would have seen that there was a bit of stress in the house, but I wouldn't have picked up that it was any more than run of the mill. And mum was really in a bad place. So again, that gave me a deeper understanding of what was going on for that mother. And I may have floated along thinking she's absolutely grand. And then on the other end of the scale, I have another family who mom would be parenting alone, living with grandparents, would have a history with her older child of TUSLA involvement and a history of severe complex mental health. And the last time I did the Warwick Edinburgh with her, we were pleasantly surprised by the high score. And this is a person who has been hospitalised numerous times for mental health issues previous to having the child. Um, and things happen to be going really well for her now. And I would have had this underlying fear of doing this with her, thinking, oh my God, what's this going to lead to? But it became a moment for her to kind of sit back and go, no, actually, I'm okay at the moment. And it became a moment for me to validate all the things she's done to help herself be okay at the moment. So I think you can have a little fear with these things, but they can often lead to deeper understanding and actually, happy revelations for the family as well. So that's it, I think.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Jane and Helga. And Jane, thanks so much, because those insights are great, and the human stories really bring it to life. And I think it's interesting the way you say there about the positives that you might get. And actually, just for anyone who is doing a deep dive into the guidebook, when they do give feedback, even when it's a really good score, they still say you're doing great, but you need to keep it up. Kind of, because we all let ourselves dip and forget to look after ourselves. So those stories are great, and just really, I hope, because one of that concern that many of us have, and Jane mentioned her apprehension. I know Mary can't be here today, but was with us in the first session. She also did some work with the Warwick Edinburgh, and like that, she had the same apprehensions about introducing it. But like Jane, she gave me some feedback, and she just said as well, just like you say, Jane, that it can actually open the doors to conversations that you wouldn't have had. And she talks about one family where she was a signposting to a GP, but also it opened the door to have a mehel, to start a mehel, and so on. So again, I think it's really that piece, and she just the way I love your phrases there, and this is why this sort of training is so great, because you can get the wording from the book, but that's not you, that's a book. So the phrases that are used in the guidance, you want to make them your own. And Jane gave some great examples there, as did Helga. And Mary, added to that, like it's really about touching in about your self-care as well, because all those concepts are around that. So that, I think that's really, really rich and great feedback. So thank you so much, Jane and Helga. And we're going to do one more measure, and then we might just open it up for questions and answers. So thanks so much so far. So I just wanted to share one more, and this is one that we did. We looked for ages to try and find one we could introduce into the Community Families Programme, because social support is such a key outcome for home visiting, and like how do you know where a family are going in terms of how they are getting on in terms of their social support. So we came across this one measure, and it's really simple. It's just 3 questions. Again, it was like the other measures, and like the way Jane talked about, it's not in any way clinical or diagnostic. It's like a population level study. It was used in Norway across a Norwegian neighborhood. So, but like the other measures, even though they're not measuring, mental health or anything, they can predict, some of those issues. And that's why, as Jane was saying, if it goes below a certain score, we do ask people to follow up with mental health services or GP or whatever. So I just said I'd introduce it to you, and I think we have Imelda here who will give you some insights into what it meant. So all these measures are giving us the rich data we want, those outcome measures. But as you've heard from Helga and Jane, they are also essential in developing a relationship with parents, getting to issues that you wouldn't have known before, etc., etc. So they're really important tools as well. So this is the Warwick, or the social support scale. It's just 3 questions. It just asks, I have to move all my boxes around because I can't see how many people are so close to you that you can count on them if you have great personal problems. How much interest and concern do people show in what you do? And then how easy is it to get practical help from neighbours or or your community if you should need it? So very simple question. But as I say, it's been used internationally as a measure of social support, and also in Ireland, it's used in terms of a big HSC research piece called Slán many years ago. Again, it has a scoring. It's very simple. There's no training really required, and there's very little guidance. But they've averaged it out in terms of what might be poor, moderate, or strong social support. So again, like what Jane and someone were saying, that you can have a sort of a cut-off point where you might say, well, and that prompts more discussion or checking in with people. So I don't know, I'm going to stop talking, but I don't know, is Imelda there? Maybe Imelda?
Susan, I'm here.
Great. Okay. Do you want to maybe just share, because again, we're only newly introducing it in terms of community families. So we're at the very early days, but and we didn't get the chance to do it at the start with this particular family, but you have an experience to share just as you were finishing up with a family, and maybe you could share it. It might just be helpful for people to see the practical benefits of the tool.
Yes, so my experience was with one of my moms, and I would have had a pretty long-term relationship with the mom, but she was ready to go back to the workplace. And she would have come into community families and accessed a lot of our group supports, and she would have been very active in that. But when we were finishing, so I had used the end of program form, checking in end of program form. At the time we had it was a paper format, and I have the paper one here. I don't know if my camera is working, if you can see me, but
no,
so
you can see it.
Yeah, so we had spent quite a bit of time actually doing the end of program. I think because when somebody is probably finishing the program because they're returning to the workplace, it meant that perhaps that she probably wanted to spend a bit of time. Maybe she was reluctant to let go of the program, I suppose is what I'm saying. And she wanted to spend some time. So we spent time going through the checklist, the end of program form. And we had left the last section is the social support section to fill out. And I suppose I felt that I had run out of time really to do this. But when we were filling it out, it was very clear to me, without having to do any scoring, that she was scoring very low on the form. So we were able to identify that her social supports were still, even though she had been accessing our community and our network, her perception of her own social supports was low. And I suppose that's part of what this is. It's the person's perception and their availability. So it's how they perceive how available other people are to support them. So she identified that it was quite low. So like, again, it's like that thing that Jane was saying, it's you are putting down the pen, you are putting things away, and you're sitting with somebody, and you're aware that this is a time now for being rather than doing, and you give time and talk that through with your mom. And we're very lucky in the service that we provide. We can signpost and refer people very easily within our own Limerick Social Services here. We have very comprehensive service that we can refer people in. So I was able to offer that mom the opportunity to go for counselling if she would like, because it had brought up some issues for her. So I think that what I would say is, if I was to do that again, I would give more time to this piece, and I would probably start with the social support piece. But again, it would depend on your relationship with the mom. I mean, maybe you would feel that this wouldn't be so relevant for one of your moms that you're finishing with. But looking back on it now, I would spend time with this mom doing that piece with her first. And I would also be aware of what services you can either signpost somebody onto or refer them into if you feel that they need further support. And again, it's just having that, being aware of what the community is around that mom. And we're with community families, so as it says, it's the community provides that support. It's knowing that we're part of her circle, but it's helping her to identify what is available to her in that wider circle that supports her. So is there anything else, Susan, you'd like me to?
No, that's great. And I suppose that's the piece about how these tools can shape your program, as everyone had mentioned. So doing it at the start means then you're opening that discussion so much earlier. And it's a bit like when our very, very first session, if you remember, we had the point about asking the questions. So you could go a while working with the family, and they might never share what they're thinking about certain things, or you might not know things unless you ask the question. So, using those tools at the start, you'd have had that discussion a lot earlier, and so on. So it's really about kind of the benefits of these tools, isn't it, really, in terms of practice and what it can change. And that made a big difference to the point at which that mum was going on to get further support. And as you say, I think she was reluctant to let go of your service as well, as you say. But what we might just do is, I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and just ask, has anyone got any questions? And I'm going to ask, can you put use the filter to put your hand up. So any questions for Jane, for Helga, for myself or Imelda about the use of tools or measures now, having heard all that? Have we got any questions? Feel free to use the chat. I haven't actually been keeping an eye on the chat, sorry. Great. Yeah, absolutely. Great positive feedback. So thanks everyone from the chat. No, that's great. And if anyone's a little bit shy, wants to pop a question in the chat, I'll give another second. Yeah, and I think the key message, and I think Helga and Jane, and then Imelda at the end, practice being comfortable. And I think Helga's point as well is, and it's so funny, I was at a thing yesterday about immunizations and how we phrase things. And you have to remember, if you start planting a seed of doubt, if you're not, I think Helga summed that really well. If you're anxious about it, that's the parent's going to pick up on that and think, oh, there must be something wrong. So in terms of like immunizations as well, they were talking yesterday, really when we're talking about immunizations to parents, we have to make sure we're assuming it's happening. We're being positive. We're not kind of sowing seeds of doubt. Thanks, Annabelle. Got your message. So really thinking and practicing is really great. And I think Jane gave you the idea there of assuming different role models might make it easier. So I think everyone, any other questions or feedback? No, that's great. I really want to pay tribute to Helga, to Jane, because a lot of those presentations are really rich, and just just for yourself, Helga and Jane, if you haven't seen the chat, like really great feedback there around sustaining the relationship and using these tools also to grow the relationship and so on. Would the Warwick Edinburgh be best measuring tool for antenatal groups? So I just we have one question there for Niamh. So yeah, I think as a tool, it's great for measuring mental well-being. Antenatally, you can use it. It's not specific to being a parent or postnatally. It's an individual tool, so you can use it at any time. So in community families, we are proposing to use it in pregnancy and at 6 weeks and at key time points throughout the intervention. So yeah, you can certainly use it antenatally in terms of well-being. So yeah. So great. Any other quick questions from the chat? Oh, we have a few more. Yeah, that's great. So listen, thanks everyone. Okay, we'll just carry on then if that's okay with where we're at. So we're moving on from the standardized measures. So yeah, just Claire, who was with us at the very first session, I can't remember what we were talking about. Oh, asking questions and getting used to talking about asking questions. But Claire had mentioned, be kind to yourselves. We talk about supporting parents and being kind, but be kind to yourselves. And if you're a little bit nervous, give yourself, do all the role modeling and so on, and the practice, and be comfortable with the tool. But, maybe ask a family, pick a family that you're very comfortable with when you're using it the first time. And last session, we talked a lot about kind of co-design and co-production. Invite, just to get yourself comfortable with the words that feel right for you. Just ask them, would they help you try it out and get their feedback on it, and maybe say, did I explain it well enough? What words would you have, you could have, if you have a good relationship with one family, maybe ask them to help you shape how you might introduce it to families. And again, so see your parents as your partners, so that, and once you've done it once or twice, you'll feel a lot more comfortable with it. And as I say, once you've done all the groundwork, it's just really important to dive in, because you're not going to kind of really get comfortable with it until you use it with families. And so really do that, but do the groundwork first. Okay. So now I'm just going to do a little tiny piece on CRM. Just for people and what it is, and what what it might become if you have it, if you don't have it, what it might be like down the line. And really, I suppose when we're talking about CRM, and you've probably heard the term bandied around a bit, we're really talking about kind of moving from lots and lots of paper into something where we can pull out information and data a lot easier. So a computerized system to do that. So just for everyone to make sure we're all on the same page, what is a CRM? So a CRM is a tool that helps providers track their interactions with families. It stores important information like contact details, background needs, etc. It helps teams provide better, more personalized care, stay organized, and improve the experience for clients. It makes it easier to manage appointments, follow-ups, communications. You'll be familiar with them all from like hospitals and GP surgeries, where they have all your caseload information in the computer. It's in the cloud now frequently. And the best thing about it, from what we're talking about, is that you can pull the data out and you can analyze it and you can look at it and you can look at trends. So I suppose what I wanted to do today is really talk about it. If you have it, if you don't have it, why it's something to be embraced, although it does come with plenty of challenges as well. So when we asked you with the Mentimeter, a lot of you don't have it, haven't used it yet. And so most of us are still working on paper and so on. So in terms of home visiting, you know, it's really great to store the referral information, your notes. You can have it for your notes and your case notes that we talked about, those observations you might be making, any interactions you might be doing with families. Again, we talked about it's so important to track all the work you do, like from sending text messages, which you think might only take 5 minutes, but end up taking 15 minutes, or, you know, phone calls you might be making, how much you're doing, because often a lot of the work you're doing is not visible. It's not seen, and we need to make sure that we highlight that and show. So you might think you're chatting with the family, and it's come up already from Helga and Jane and Imelda about linking people in and signposting people here, there, and everywhere. And, you know, all that takes time, and we need to highlight that. And then obviously what we've been talking about today is knowing if we're making a difference. So it's really handy to have the standardized checklists and the measures on that, the system. Makes life so much easier for everyone. And it just really means that when we are doing those reporting, and again, it's come up already, reporting to funders or to TUSLA or to whoever, we can have that information there on the system and easy to pull out. So it's really important for practice data, for learning data, for both, but they're not easy to design, and you're always trying to struggle to meet everyone's needs. From the parents, we want something that's not, you know, overwhelming for them. We want to make sure that they're comfortable with it. The home visitor yourselves need to be really comfortable with it. It has to be user friendly. The program needs information out of it, and the funder want information. So, you know, there's a lot to think about when designing them, and it can be torturous for anyone who has been involved in getting it set up, depending on how complex it is. You can have it so that you gather your information while you're out and about on your home visits and then come back to base and type it all in. Or you can have it so that it's on a tablet and use it in the moment so that you save time not having to go back and enter information in. So there's different ways of doing it differently, and different programs have different setups. But it certainly is the way we'll be going. So if you don't have it now, it's quite likely in the next 5 years, you know, there will be a CRM system. So is a cartoon. After analysing all your data, I think we can safely say that none of it is useful. But so really, it's so important to make sure that we have a way of analysing our information, and that's really what a CRM system does. And it means your coordinators or your managers aren't overwhelmed counting information. So I'm just going to share with you some. Now, this is really early. It's not even. We haven't had a whole year of data, but in the early days of collecting some information, this is from some of the community families programs. So just to show you how helpful it is, how you can track, and you can see we talked at the start about clean data and accurate data. And this is some of our information from when we were trialing. So you can see even in the top right corner, there's that darker blue has nothing opposite it. So we were still getting used to entering information in, and we didn't get stuff in. So we have an anomaly, you might say. So as someone looking at this say, well, what does that mean? We need to sort that out. But you can see that having been able to access this sort of information, and we collect it at different time points, how useful it is. So this is the Oslo questions that we had, and we can see how people's social support was. And obviously, if we have this information, we can go back then and say, gosh, you know, we're not doing too badly, but it'd be great to get at the end of programme that we want more strong support there. So what are we going to do at the start of our programme to be able to get that? So it's really a helpful tool to check in. Now, this has only a month or two's of data worth in it, so it's not reliable at all. But I just wanted to show you the graphics so you can see how helpful CRM can be in terms of learning more. And we have some other ones, just again, there's some information about managing stress. So this is a self-care. Again, it's not what we call a psychometric measure, but it is a standardized one that we have, where we check in at different time points in terms of how people's how people are managing their stress. So you can see they're managing their stress better at the end and in pregnancy. And no surprise, it dips during the crazy weeks of the life with a new baby. But again, wouldn't be very accurate. It's only a few months of data. But you can see again how helpful this would be after you've had a year or two's worth of data, and you can see, gosh, look what's happening for our families. We can see this is happening at pregnancy, but then what happens later on and so on, and what's happening at the end. So again, these are useful tools for us to reflect on our practice. Now, what's really important is that as a home visitor, you're getting to see some of this back. But as I said at the last session, please be patient with everybody organising and managing programmes, because it takes an awful lot to actually get to a point where we can share this sort of visual data back to everyone in home visiting teams. So, you know, this is where we want to go, but give us time to get there, I guess, is my key message. And again, this, I can't even see at the top of this, sorry, being kind to yourself. Again, you can see people are getting better at that at the end here. But again, this data isn't really reliable, but it's a great, helpful tool to help us. So again, we looked at breastfeeding again, and how we're doing on breastfeeding. So you can see how important it is for us to be reflecting. And I think Helga and Jane use the term reflection a lot in terms of, getting that reflective supervision. But again, this is also about reflecting on how well as a programme we are delivering our outcomes. So I'm going to invite now, we've got some people who've had, again, only because we've recently done it from Community Families, who've, we've, like many other programmes, have gone through the torturous process of trying to set one up. And by no means is it perfect. And I think the journey with CRM, I think everybody, one of the things we need to remind ourselves is to be patient, and it's never finished. It's never perfect. You're always going to want to tweak it and change it. So if I could invite the two Claires and Grace, maybe to just share some of your experiences now. So Claire and Grace and Claire, if you're there, can you just say hello?
Hi.
Hi. So I wonder, maybe I'll start with Claire from Westmeath. Claire, can you tell us what your fears might have been when we first talked about CRM and discussed it?
Personally, I didn't have too many fears because I quite like technology, so I was looking forward to it. But I do feel that the way it was done with us when we were doing the changeover, it was done with ease. Like, we did kind of slowly go into it, and for the first couple of weeks we did CRM and paper until we were comfortable enough with CRM before we got rid of the paper. But there was a few hiccups, the same as there would be in any site, but it wasn't anything major.
Great.
I think it was done quite well. It was like we had time to kind of practice with fake families, I suppose, so kind of like a role play that we did. And we were able to put in, make up scenarios and put them into CRM. And I think that really benefited, especially if you do it together as a team, so you're all learning together.
Yeah. And Grace, I know you're there too. You were worrying about it too. Or is Grace there? Sorry, I can't see. Hello, Grace.
Hiya.
Grace. Hi, great. Yeah.
I suppose for us, my fears was the fear the unknown. Even though I had worked on CRM systems already, I always found all the systems were different to meet the needs of the service. And I suppose for us, our home visitors had been using a different system, so it was changing over to that system, which was hard, and there was challenges, but I found we took it at our own pace. Like, the home visitors kind of took one or two families and worked on them, and we built up our confidence with the CRM system and then progressed to more families. So it's kind of taking it at your pace and taking it easy. But there was fears, but it's true about that saying, practice makes perfect. So it did help once we got into it. but there was fears changing over and the fear of the unknown.
The fear of the unknown, yeah. And Claire, now I know, Claire, you had experience of, in Parents First, you had experience of it before. So you didn't come with it with the same fears, but maybe if you can reflect on maybe some of the benefits you see for the CRM.
Yeah, so I had like quite extensive use of Salesforce or the CRM in a previous organization, and I suppose I had seen the positives because the stats from that organization would have informed kind of nearly even government statistics. So I could definitely see the benefits in terms of data and everything like that. My only fear, and I suppose it was fear for like the transition for people in the when I arrived in Parents First, because they were still transitioning over. I think it's that fear of technology nearly that we all kind of have. And you know, maybe you're used to paperwork and just getting used to inputting data correctly and that kind of thing. But once we all supported each other and just kind of like that fear seemed to go, and the I know the home visitors in Laois Offaly anyway are very good at using it and inputting everything, and we're just kind of, we reflect on it weekly in a team meeting, and I think that has brought down the level of fear around it as well. Just lots of communication and lots of like checking in, does this go on, does that go on, you know, that kind of stuff has really, I mean, I do think there's always a fear when there's new systems introduced to any organization, but definitely we seem to have overcome them, which is really positive.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I suppose one of the things is when we introduced it, we were combining it with asking for lots more information. So not only did we have technology, but we had a whole load of new questions that were never on paper before. So I wonder maybe Claire and Grace, if you can think about that, the kind of before the paper experience versus now the IT experience. And I know Claire in Westmeath, you bring your tablet into the family, and you haven't, you know, I wonder if you could talk about that as well.
Yeah, I just find with the tablet it's a lot more organized. I would have a hectic car situation with all the paperwork. So back when we were doing it on paper, everything, you know, was kind of kept in the car if you were doing your paperwork after a visit. And then I would bring it into the office, say weekly, for it to be stored in the office. Whereas on the tablet, you can input your data into the tablet. I don't have to travel into the office with it. It's so much neater. The tablet is in the bag. And I find it's easier for me with the tablet, especially if you're doing any of the forms, so the you and your baby forms and different things that are on CRM, which we wouldn't have had in paper form before. So it really helps on certain visits to open up the visit and open up the conversation. I kind of feel like it gives you a guide if you're visiting a family that you're kind of struggling to connect with, or the relationship isn't as strong, you know, if it's a new family. When you go in to do the you and your baby forms, especially, I feel like it really helps to open up the visit. And I find personally, if I have the tablet, I don't hand the tablet over to the family to do. I know that works in some situations, but I find personally, if I'm asking the questions from the tablet, it kind of works better because it opens up the conversation. If you give the tablet to the family to fill it out for themselves, excuse me, it's kind of stopping the conversation because they're too busy reading the questions and, you know, picking which answer. So I find, yeah, I just think it's a lot more, it's a lot easier, a lot less writing as well, because sometimes if you're in a hurry, your writing could have been quite illegible. And so you have to go back and look on forms that you filled out. At least for everything on the tablet, it's all typed up. So
yeah,
it's much easier.
And Grace, thanks, Claire. That's great. And it's really about finding what's useful for you and what works for you. And, you know, Grace, have you anything to add to that there?
I suppose our old system was more of a tick box, whereas this is more personalised for the families. So you're gaining more information and you're learning more about the families. So then that supports you to help the families, plus plan your visits. And I suppose with the forms and the measures we're using, that's also opening up the questions to the family and learning more about the family. So again, you can support the families how they're getting on and support the babies. And so yeah, so I find using the tablets and the questions and the way it's formed does help the home visitors. Plus also they have a record there. They can go back on visits and look what they did on that visit or what they need to learn about the family. So you have it all in the one place and it's convenient as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great. And Claire, we might finish up with you. And anything you want to add in terms of kind of the benefits? I mean, I think you'll all agree there's always hiccups. I think you've said that. But is there anything else you'd like to add, Claire, in terms of kind of using CRM within home visiting?
Yeah, I think I would use a laptop. So I think the recording afterwards, as opposed to writing notes, it just seems to streamline it in terms of information. And I think I find that really useful. And I know that's the same feedback we've had from home visitors as well, that just it can sometimes a little reminder of like what you actually did. And I think a lot of the time we play down the amount of work we've done. So I find that, you know, compared to filling forms, I think that the notes that we get from home visits are much more tangible, and we can really see what work is being done. So I think that's the really positive thing, because there's fantastic work that was going on that wasn't being recorded. And that's
Yeah.
my big, like, I'm a big champion of Salesforce in that manner, because sorry, I always refer to it as Salesforce rather than CRM. But I'm, you know, because I'm like, record, because you're doing brilliant work and it's all there, you know.
Yeah,
That's the difference, I think.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so hard for that work to shine through on paper, which is
Yeah.
here, there, and everywhere, or in your head, or some of it's in your diary and some of it's here. So it brings it all into one spot,
And when
really.
you see that summarized in a pie chart, you know, on your quarterly or 6 monthly stats, it's even more satisfying
It's
to see
satisfying.
everything that's being done, you know. That's
Yeah.
what I like about it.
Yeah. So thank you to our panel. Has anyone any questions you want to ask? Those who haven't used CRM and are curious about it, or anybody any questions about it? Or anything to add for those of you who have CRM? Anything you'd like to add that we haven't mentioned? No. Okay, great. Well, listen, we'll carry on. We're nearly there. So just yeah. So yeah, I mean, the other things people have mentioned to us is just around supervision. So if you bring the tablet or your CRM system in, you have all the information there. You can look at it with your coordinator. It helps us make sure we're all doing the same thing with every family, so that program fidelity piece. But there are challenges, and you have to be upfront about knowing that there is an upfront investment in time, getting used to it. As Claire said there, any change takes time to adjust. And then it can be hard, and that's what I was saying earlier about being patient. It can be hard to have the time to analyze it. And we all, as programs, have different resources, different back office supports in terms of who can go in and pull that information out to have a look at it and feed it back to yourselves. So that's definitely a challenge for us to figure out as we go forward with this. So I just want to, the other thing before I go on, because we're going to break up into rooms, but before we do that, I'm just going to share one more. You'd all asked about, and I will send this by email, just ways in which you can introduce this way of working with families. So we've done up a template. It's a draft, and it's really for you to take it back to your own program and tweak it and work on it. But basically, it's basically like a script, as it were, to say how we talk about this with families, especially at the start, maybe when you're getting consent forms done, you know, and things like that. So we've drafted something. I hope you can see this here. If it's sharing okay, can I zoom in? Sorry, I won't go through it in too much detail. Let me see if I can zoom up a bit there. Sorry. But basically, we've just written something out. This is from the training subgroup, just kind of asking parents about sharing their information, why it's important for them, so that we don't miss anything, that we offer the same support to all families. We like to check in at different times. Some cases you can hear from the different projects, these things are completed at different times, the beginning, during, and the end of our time together. It helps us do a better job. And then there's a little bit about how we want to improve our program for all families. And that might be how you can introduce the topic of why we get some of the demographic information. I hope you can all see this here. But as I say, we'll email it to you around kind of sometimes why we're asking about disability or ethnicity. And so there's some wording there. Again, I think the key message from today's sessions and all the sessions is you need to practice your own phrases that are comfortable for you. But these gives you some idea of some of the things you might like to say. Excuse me. And then lastly, we've just put a piece about the future national home visiting programme, which will be based at Tusla, which is based at Tusla, and, the rationale behind that. So we'll send that all out to you. And as I say, it's not that you have to use those words or anything, but it's like a rough wording of things, and bring it back to your team, trash it out, practice it, and hopefully you'll be equipped then to introduce this way of working with your parents. So I think that probably brings us up to having a breakout room. You're probably dying to catch up with each other, so we'll just go for 15 minutes if that's okay. So really, I'm going to ask Michelle to assign you to some breakout rooms. So just generally, some general feedback on the use of measures and any other supports you would like within your program, either within your program or external to your program, like from the Home Visiting Alliance or from the National Programme Office that you'd like help with. And then the last question we'd like you to address in your breakout room is, what changes will you make to your practice after these sessions? So if we could, are you there, Michelle? Yeah, you're good. So we're going to invite you into breakout rooms, and we'll go to 12. Welcome back, everyone. Quick breakout room session. So I wonder, and we want to all get out early and have lunch for this weekend. So maybe we'll do quick. If you can keep your feedback quick, it'd be really important. And if you have additional feedback, please use the chat function. That would be great. So can I go to room 1 first then, and just maybe, so that was Carol, Helga, Imelda, Lucy, and Sinead. And maybe someone would just quickly sum up your thoughts on the sessions that we've had and the feedback, which was just especially on the measures and what supports you might need. So can someone from room 1 feedback?
It went a wee bit off topic, but I'll give you what we...
Great, Helga. No harm.
I think it was Carol we were talking about the availability of being able to see all the data and see your value is really useful. And the availability kind of at your fingertips of other information that you need, that from, I suppose, from past contact. It also is a good point of contact highlighter as to, you're realizing how many people you have actually been in contact with for a particular case.
Those kind of the CRM benefits there, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we spoke then quite a bit about sometimes, between the paper and the tablet, that sometimes often if there are young children present, it can be difficult to navigate the use of a tablet whilst you're in a visit. It can become the focus for the child. They want to play on it, and then it defeats the purpose. And also maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable of nearly contradicting your content about using tablets and screen time and stuff. So it's down to the individual practitioner and what you're comfortable with, and the family and what you're going into, and the situation where it's going to be difficult to take a tablet. Maybe it's not the thing to do. It's useful to clearly see the extent and the intensity of your input and your intervention, and it can kind of streamline and reduce irrelevant information when we're inputting it rather than writing it. Often we might write, handwritten stuff, we might write more irrelevant information. And
Yeah.
when you're inputting it on the computer, you might keep it more relevant, with less maybe judgment statements that you don't necessarily mean to have. And we didn't get any further than that.
No, great. Great. So you guys focused a lot on the CRM. So I mean that's great feedback. So room 2, Grace, Lisa, Marie, Michelle, Naomi, Neve, Triona. Any feedback on generally on the use of the measures on the CRM, the psychometric measures that we used as well, the Topsy, the Warwick, and any supports you might like. Someone want a feedback from room 2? Who's going to be brave?
I suppose with us, there wasn't many people that had experience with the measuring tools or the CRM. So it's kind of myself and Grace that was kind of doing all the talking. But I was kind of asking questions. I use the home visiting program that I'm involved in is the Parent Child Plus program. So we use the CRM system for inputting our progress notes. We've been using them a few years, and one of the benefits, I suppose, for the home visitors is they're not coming in on Monday morning for supervision, saying they'd no paperwork, they'd no forms left.
The dog didn't eat your homework.
So like they're able to input as soon as they leave a visit, whether it's walking down the street to their next visit or whether it's sitting in their car, they're able to, because we have them on our phones, so they're able to input the information there. So it's very handy just to have it on the phone. And one of the girls was saying as well about putting in observations. When you had it on paperwork, you weren't able to see it before, but you're able to look back and see all the information that you've put in. And then I was saying as well, I use the measuring tools for baby massage and Incredible Babies. But we like that we look back on them and we see the pre and the post, but we have never scored them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's just the thing, isn't it? It's and I mean, I said, like, we have to put in the infrastructures in place to enable that to happen easily, as you say, Niamh, because even if you have the numbers, it's hard to see the trends across groups of families. Yeah. So that's where we need to get to. Would I be right, Niamh? Is that kind of what you guys would be looking for, is kind of getting that information back and seeing these patterns and these trends?
Yeah, no, like we're part of an ABC site, so like we would be putting them into a system where everything is added up then, but for us just as one site, we wouldn't be adding up and scoring and feeding back to the parents, obviously, because it's not a one-to-one session, it's for groups.
And you've touched on something there, and I think Helga and Niamh, Helga and Jane touched on it as well, is you might not be sharing the score back unless the family wants it. It's a very, but that you're equipped to be able to do so should they ask you, but so either at the individual or the group level, to be able to spot those trends would be a great place to get to. But we're all working together. Hopefully we'll get there. So that's great. Room 2, great feedback. Room 3, I don't want to put everyone on the spot because we all want to finish as quick as we can.
I said I would speak for room 3. Apologies, no cameraman.
Great.
Playing about. So listen,
great, Kathleen.
Kathleen, sorry. We had a fairly new group of individuals in terms of length of role. We're only a few of us are a bit of a length of time. So some haven't rolled out any of their screenings or anything like that. Some are active with the CRM methods and are very complimentary and positive about them. Various use of them: phone, tablet, laptop. You can type in, or some of them are voice recognition. You can voice in, which is even
wow. That's very impressive.
Sounded very handy and useful. I suppose, like as Niamh was saying there, if you're walking to your next visit or drive, whatever, in between or whatever, there's always that opportunity to do that. I suppose it's all that ease of access, reflecting back on everything that's been done in the one place. And again, that value of what we do, because so much of it we spend a lot of time doing extras and add-ons and in-betweens and sign, posting and follow-ups and all, but it's not always there and not always noted or seen in that way. I suppose then Rebecca made the point that there's still a flexibility to suit the family, and again, based on what the others were saying there about the tablet use isn't always appropriate for a family. So the paper is still the option. You know, it's very flexible. It allows for both. I suppose, that was really it. I suppose in terms of what do we need, I suppose I was just thinking there, you know, sort of, it's the know-how on how to pull those pieces of data out, be that around the trends, the patterns, the demographics, if we need to report back on that in any way. It's the know-how. I suppose, like I'm with Life Start, so CRM isn't in use yet with us. So it's the know-how. You know, I can definitely see the merit in it and the value in it so much. But and the reality is, yes, there will be hiccups, there will be challenges, but that's just
and you're right, Kathleen. I mean, and it's all this building CRMs, you know, it costs money as well, and you've just triggered a thought of me, you know, how do we get to the point where we can build it in such a way that everyone can see the information at the same time, whilst also protecting confidentiality and so on, and doing that? Because at the moment, you know, I know it's mainly coordinators or managers who can see that, and it takes time to analyze it. And I know that's been one of the feedbacks, and we're all so busy. I know we have Mary here with us from Donegal, and she's multitasking away up there with one ear here, you know, so our you know, at that level, there's so much to do, and it takes so long. I know Katrina in Westmeath had fed back on the November sessions how if only she had the time to sit down and look at it, and then, as you say, bring it back to your teams. So you flagged that really, Kathleen. So, you know, we'll make sure that goes back as well as feedback. So thanks for that. Room 3 or room 4. Belinda, Claire, Emma, Nadia, have I got that right yet? Anyone? Or maybe if room 4, 5 and 6, if someone would just like to add anything, just shout out there. Is there anything we haven't mentioned?
I can speak very quickly now. We kind of got a bit sidetracked, so maybe I suppose we just kind of spoke about our own anxieties about introducing the forms. A lot of us are very new in that group. And I suppose when the questions, when you do introduce the forms, and if they do divulge some information that is quite sensitive and maybe concerning, like having the supports available to signpost them. If they are available, is there long waiting lists? You know, is this playing in the back of your head? You know, that if something is divulged, you know, that would be definitely one of our concerns. I suppose we spoke about whether to introduce it at the beginning or once the relationship is established. Like I was going to say, the TOPSy forums are, I suppose, more generalized, more generalistic kind of questioning, kind of a roundabout, whereas the Warwick, I suppose, is a bit more deeper level, you know, kind of mental health. So I suppose that's quite heavy to be coming in on your first you know, visit, maybe, to be asking about that. So I suppose that we're kind of discussing back and forth the pros and cons to doing it maybe when you're more established, is to do it at the start, you know. And I suppose the tablet would be probably less time consuming, but then as well you might be dealing with families who aren't maybe, you know, literate in those kind of forms of technology maybe as well, and might fear, you know, the technology side of things. And then I suppose we just spoke, you know, it's all about practice as well, practicing with your colleagues, like practice, role playing, that kind of thing, before we head out, you know. That was really kind of it.
No, great feedback there, Emma. And I think we'll flag all that as well. And I think one of the things you mentioned there is just the supports available. And I think it's really good in terms of each program to, you know, when you go back to base, to kind of map those out. And it could be quite broad, you know, obviously in terms of mental health, you know, it's not just your PHN and your GP, but also, you know, Pieta House, or, you know, there's lots and lots of supports. And I suppose, again, it's about triggering all the other trainings you might have. And I know Mary, who was with us in the first session, because they're based in the HSE, they did a lot of the suicide prevention training, Safe Talk and so on. And so it's all exposure to all that just gives you words or phrases that are really helpful to seek out as well. And, you know, there's the new perinatal mental health supports. So yeah, having those mapped out and having them in your back pocket, as it were, not necessarily that you're going to pull them out in front of the parent, but that you have that knowledge, and it might be over time. And I think Jane mentioned it as well, and Helga. That I know Mary mentioned it, that you might follow up then the next week or follow up the next week. So yeah, going back and having those team discussions now that you've had a chance to think about those things would be really great. Great stuff. Thanks for that, Emma. And anyone else from room 5 or 6? And we'll finish up then.
In there from room 5. We just started with Fiona there. She agreed with Jane actually about the Edinburgh Warwick, that it opened up a discussion. And it shows, is it an ongoing problem, or were they just having a bad day? So
yes,
it would
yes,
yeah. And also, there's an acknowledgement of difficulties, and enabling a discussion around the supports available for a person, like maybe self-care, mindfulness, things like that.
Yes.
One parent said she wasn't into that shit at all, didn't want to know about it. But also then, once you start referring, it can highlight a lack of available services in a specific area. There's not all the services that aren't always available in every area.
Yeah.
And they also noticed that a lot of parents were scoring themselves high with the Topsy, that they were reluctant to, give too much away and wanted to get a high score.
Yes.
But they said it was good in terms of creating a discussion around that, that you can come back to.
And just Catherine, as you say that, you've just raised a really quick point. I should shut up because we're trying to finish it earlier, but I'm thinking that piece sometimes, and those of you who are familiar with those, often you might find people do score themselves lower the second time because they know more. The first time they score, they might score quite high, and then actually they've learned more about parenting, or they've learned more about this, so they actually score themselves lower. So it's having 3 time points is quite good as well. But sorry for interrupting.
As a measure, then you could measure maybe an improvement in parenting skills, in general. Some parents like paperwork. They were saying it takes 2 or more. It could take 2 or more visits just to get through a questionnaire. And one thing that they did bring up was if there's older children present, that they can be eavesdropping on the conversation, and maybe it's not appropriate sometimes
to do it then.
That was another thing.
So you guys really have to juggle so much when you cross that threshold. Do I do it now? Do I not? What's, reading, all those subtle signs of reading the room. Who's listening in the background? Yeah, so very skillful role. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then we got on about CRMs and saying, Jane was saying how much she loves CRM, and we're saying we're getting one here very soon. And but we would be recognizing the need for administration support around extracting the information from CRM.
Yeah, extracting the information. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And how important it is that it's recording all those little things we're doing, like sending texts, making phone calls, blah, blah, the time-consuming things.
Great, yeah, because we really need to highlight all those roles now. Now, listen, we're at 1 o'clock, so could I ask room 5 and 6 to add any other feedback into the chat room, because I don't want to keep you any longer. I have one other quick thing to ask you to do. Michelle will send out the survey again, but we wanted to just
survey
ask
will
you,
just pop up. It just pops up when you leave. Yeah.
We just wanted to ask you, just remember, I want to thank you all. And really, we're on a kind of learning journey together. And I suppose I hope after the sessions that you come away realizing that not only are you juggling so many other things as you go into a home, but you're also so crucial as what we might say, our co-inquirer, our researcher. You're really important to help us learn more, and that together, going back to your team and work with your organization, bring some of the topics back and tease out how are we going to do that? What are we going to do? That would be really great. And we're kind of tight on time for questions and answers. Do get in touch if there's anything we haven't addressed. But I do want to ask you, just if you can do this in your own time. Just if you could take the screenshot of the QR code. I just have 3 quick Mentimeter questions I'd love you to do. And obviously Michelle's survey will pop up. But really just so we can know how many of you the sessions you attended. that would be great. Also then, if you haven't attended any of the sessions, did you manage to access the recordings back? And then one last question really quickly. You can, as I say, once you click in the QR code, you should be able to do it. Just want to get a sense now, after all that, how confident you feel about some of what we've addressed. That would be really great if you could do that. As I say, take the QR code. You can do it in your own time. That would be really great. And you're already flying there at that. So listen, thank you all so much. I'm going to stop sharing. You can keep filling in whatever you're doing. Also on the PowerPoints, sorry, there are resources. Sorry, I'll just quickly share them with you, just so you see. I've got links at the end of the PowerPoints for all sorts of different resources. If you want to be a real nerd and learn any more about what we've talked about, there's lots and lots of videos about the co-production stuff we did, and so on, lots of other information there. So otherwise, I just want to thank you all for